We're going to have a little fun on your Daily Detroit for this Friday, June 21st, 2024. Coming to town next weekend on Sunday, June 30th to the Magic Bag in Ferndale is a band that someone who grew up in the 90s like me will definitely know. And if you don't, well, you should get acquainted with the alt-rock legendary sound of Letters to Cleo. Letters to Cleo has some new material to go with favorites like I Want You to Want Me, Here and Now, and Cruel to Be Kind. To talk about the band, music, and the show, my guest is guitarist Michael Eisenstein. If it sounds like I'm a little excited, I'll put it on the table right now that I'm a fan. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Joining me on the line is a member of one of the bands that I still love them to this day, but fell in love with them back in the 90s. They are coming to the metro area. Michael Eisenstein of Letters to Cleo. Welcome to Daily Detroit. I appreciate you.
Great to be here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's really an honor because, there are so many bands that come and go. And one of the things I love to see is a good tour of something that, somebody really like. And whether it's, you're getting back together or you've been able to make it through all these years. I know that you all worked on some different projects and did some things. I just love that it is, started in 1990 with that band, going to now, and this is something that we can still enjoy. I mean, how do you pull that off? That's amazing.
Well, we did shut it down for a while. We were not active from about 2000, with the exception of a couple little shows, until 2016. So we had a long break and kind of we're able to come back to it fresh with some new material and new energy. And then also we keep it to a very condensed thing. It's not like our main job for anybody. We sort of set aside, carve out a few weeks per year to dive in and do it. So it stays always really fun and fresh.
That is awesome. Do you feel like some of those time constraints and kind of focusing and having your different projects kind of helps the creative juices keep going?
It certainly helps us in terms of everyone's creative palette is a lot wider because we're all out doing other very varied projects and then come back and bring sort of that information to this, but the scheduling becomes the hard part, really.
Oh yeah, balancing everything. I mentioned 1990, and how has being a musician changed in that time? Kind of the ups and the downs. I mean, obviously there's technology and all that stuff, but as far as the art and what you're producing, how has that changed or not changed?
Back in the early 90s, we would develop our songs largely in our rehearsal space. We would work on them, we would get together 2 nights a week, gig on the weekends, and work up new songs over the course of weeks or months, play them live, get sort of audience reaction. And nowadays you kind of you have this little recording studio built into your computer and everybody has one, and you sort of maybe commit to things a little earlier because you're making demos and stuff. So it's just a very different process than how we write now. And I'm not saying one's better or worse than the other, but it was just a different experience.
Is the energy different when you're doing it live with each other versus kind of in this remote way?
It's a lot easier to pivot when you're just all in the room together, kind of trying different things in the moment than trying to sort of calculate that interaction through emailing MP3s back and forth.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one thing with the pandemic is we're doing, we went to this mode where basically I'm recording the show in my spare bedroom. And before that, we always did it in person. And now we do a lot of them in person. And it's really good to get back to it because it's a whole different thing, at least for me, with conversations and things, because there's just something about that interaction back and forth. And I wonder how much that's affected digital creation in general, because now there's lots of people who never knew that world of a more in person, I'm going to work on the project kind of situation.
Yeah. The upside is you get to collaborate with people that are not in the same city as you, which is a kind of a cool upside. But there is, a whole generation of people who work in a different way.
Well, yeah. And so you were talking about how the band is something that is a project of many for everyone involved. What is it that tips you where you're okay, time to do, a new single or a new thing? Is it, especially being, in different cities now and everything, how does that come together? Where does that inspiration strike?
Sometimes I'll just have an idea and it'll be this is clearly a Cleo thing. But most often it's the other guitarist, Greg McKenna, who rallies the troops and is like, let's do this now. Let's and he puts the pressure on, and we feel accountable to him. So we say like, okay, well, maybe Kay and I will get together and try and finish this song that you started or something, you know.
It's funny how in different groups where, people might assume it's the lead singer or whatever, but in so many groups throughout history, it's always an interesting mix to see like who is the creative force for different corners of whatever project's happening. I think about like Queen and bands like that,
Yeah, I mean, and it's changed a lot from the early days, but Greg was always sort of like the ringleader within the band. He was like, in the early days, everything from driving the van to, kind of running our tours to paying the rehearsal space bills. Like he was always sort of like the in charge one. And so that in a sense hasn't changed.
When I think about all the songs that you've done and all the different albums, obviously there's a few that stick out and are still, played a bazillion times, and you'll still hear them, on radio stations and things like that. When you do shows, how do you feel about doing those songs and mixing that in with like the newer stuff? Like what is your energy towards that? And how do you feel about those tracks where it's like, obviously, it's like, oh, play that one and everyone knows it versus something new?
Well, I mean, at this point, we're far enough in that it's like we try to just construct a cross section, and we're not like overly, perhaps naively, like in love with our new output either. So we just try to put together a good cross section. If we have a new song out, obviously we're going to make sure that people get to hear it, but we always are going to play, Here and Now, at least one of the jams from 10 Things I Hate About You, Awake, all the favorites we always put in the set, and we're happy to play them.
Yeah. You mentioned 10 Things I Hate About You. Do you have any memories or things that you share about like being involved with that or putting that together? Because that was one of the movies, like back in the day, for somebody like me, and my friends, that was like, oh, of course. Like some people even label it like one of the top teen movies of its time.
I have so many memories of it. The biggest one is that we had done a couple movie projects prior and didn't have any reason to believe that this would be anything other than a teen movie that came out in the summer of whatever it was, 1999 or spring, and came and went like anything else. We had shocked to know that people are still watching and loving this movie, 25 years later. So that's one. It's just the unexpected longevity of the film. Two is just, that closing shot where we're up on top of the school.
Mm-hmm.
This, predated drones being used in existing, really. So the whole thing was shot from a helicopter.
No way.
Extremely expensive shot. They got 2 tries to get it right. We're perched up on this tiny stage on a 4 or 5 story building on the edge of a cliff overlooking Puget Sound, basically. And it was just kind of a thrilling but intense shot to have this helicopter flying around you while you're pantomiming playing the song. That was the real biggest memory.
Oh my gosh, that makes me think of a social media video I saw recently where people were surprised it was a racing movie that was being shot, and it was the full helicopter rig, and everybody's mind was blown that people would actually fly helicopters. Because these people would, a lot of these people on social media would never know that that's how it was done, and to see like the helicopters just a few feet from the cars was really crazy. But that was just like normal back then.
Yeah, and expensive though. But now all those shots are done with drones, and you see like in relatively speaking, like low budget shows, these aerial shots now that are possible because of this remote control cameras.
Yeah, and the cameras are getting smaller and better and all that stuff. I mean, that's one of the things that technology brings is so many more creative outlets for what you can do, Yeah. So when you think about kind of your impact, whether it's the work you've done with the band, and you kind of look to today and forward, is there anything that you're really excited about? Any bands or things that you're seeing that you're like, oh, this is really glad, like, I'm really glad that I was a part of this, and then this also inspired that, or something that you're looking at the music scene, you're like, wow, this is really great.
The one thing that is gratifying for me is like hearing from younger musicians that like getting into our band was like pivotal in their development, or they're like an influence. What the band that's opening up these upcoming dates in the Midwest is one of those acts that like they got into music kind of through our band, and it's just really gratifying to have this like next generation that like we made a little impact on and like sort of carrying on in the, rock tradition.
Yeah. I know it's been a little while since you all have been through here. What's it like to get back to the Midwest? And, if you've been through, Metro Detroit before, I assume in the past, but it's been a minute. Do you have any good memories or things you're looking forward to?
I have been fortunate that I've been able to come through on trips with other artists that I've toured with.
Oh, cool. Like who?
I toured with Our Lady Peace for a while.
Sweet.
And Melissa Etheridge and Tonic.
Awesome.
Over the years, every 5 years or so, it feels like I've passed through. But, the food is always great. Good to see old friends from back in the day, or even just fans that we, are friendly with. Just, the people and the food, maybe get to a couple ballparks if time permits,
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much that's kind of special about this place. And I get why people, like to be here. And, one of the things that's special is you're going to be doing the Magic Bag in Ferndale. There is an energy to that place. How do you approach going to a venue that's in the hundreds of seats versus like you've played all kinds of venues, all kinds of sizes? What's special about doing a venue like this? And, I think that also adds to anybody who's going to want to come to this thing.
At our core, we're kind of a bar band anyway. We never crossed over into that threshold of playing like stadiums where you really have to change your whole act. So like our career kind of like started in bars, and that's where we developed our sound. So it's like it's tailor suited for that kind of club anyway. We you start getting over a couple thousand, it's less personal. It's less of like what our vibe is anyway. So like it's very, very appropriate, and that's the setting we're most comfortable in.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like it's going to be a party and a good time,
Yeah.
So it will be at the Magic Bag, Sunday, June 30th, doors at 7 p.m. We will put a link to tickets on our website and in our podcast show notes. Michael Eisenstein, thank you so much for spending some time with us on Daily Detroit. It is an honor and a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Before we go, I want to put a pin in your calendar for Thursday, July 11th, 2024. Our Daily Detroit Happy Hour returns, this time at the Royce in downtown Detroit from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. We'll put an event listing up. If you've got questions, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Let me know, but I wanted you, our listeners, to know about it first for July 11th. All right, with that, I am Jairus Days. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit. Talk on Monday.